It's here to promote international, interstate commerce and commerce with the Indian tribes. That's why we're here. That's why there is a federal government. That's why we're not 13 separate colonies and who knows what warring on the North American continent. The idea was, when they set up the country, to promote trade among the different colonies without duties, without import and export taxes. It should be one country. You shouldn't have what they have in Europe, which resulted in constant wars throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. They weren't going to have that. So if we attack an international bank for a 60-year-old crime, tort, contract violation, the federal government, being that in its DNA is the Commerce Clause, no matter how sympathetic, they're going to have to take the side of the Dresdner Bank. So, no federal questions, zero.
Please take a moment to write down lawline.com's first verification code. Lawline.com's first verification code is the word vacation, all in lowercase, V-A-C-A-T-I-O-N, vacation.
It's all about a local guy who lost his deposit in a Manhattan bank. So, I don't plead any federal questions at all, and we are going to Queen Supreme. Now, why are we going to Queen Supreme? Because we are there every day. Every day. I was on the homicide panel. They like me there. They're not going to laugh at me. In the federal court, Rule 11. Anybody hear of Rule 11? Out. We would have been out. You file a 60-year-old case in a federal court, $10,000 fine. Don't do that. In a state court where you're known to everybody, different matter. Also, state court judges are elected. This would look real bad in an election. They rule against a guy who for 60 years never got his property back and now is living in a rent-controlled apartment on Social Security. Even in a judicial election with no opponents, this is not good. As opposed to someone who's appointed for life, who's answerable to the federal government, different world. Different world, like night and day. So, state court. So we file a summons and complaint, and I write all this in the complaint, which you don't usually do, and I attach the documents of seizure, and I get them translated by a professor at the State University at New Paltz, a professor of German, so that they will take it seriously. Because what I'm hoping is, look, the guy's 90 years old. This litigation could go on for years. Maybe we could settle. Maybe we could settle for 1% of what it's worth. If we settled for 1% of what it was worth, he would get a few $1 million, and that would be a great result. That's what we hoped would happen. So I throw all of this in the summons and complaint. We serve it on the Dresdner Bank, and we figure we're going to get a settlement. The next thing we do is we figure Mr. Nacher, his case now has a much longer lifespan than him. And we are committed to this case, Leavitt and I, because of our own backgrounds. And we decide we better help Mr. Nacher prepare his will, which we do. Leavitt writes his will, and in the will we put the case that his executor is directed to carry on the case after his death. He didn't have any children because he was, frankly, he was too depressed his whole life from having gotten kicked out of his country and has had all his property confiscated, that there was no children. But he had a nephew named Ronnie Mandowski who lived in Toronto. Ronnie became the executor, and the will specifically instructed Ronnie to carry on the case after Mr. Nacher died, which he did. So when we sign his will, we promise him, look, Mr. Nacher, this case, it's on, we think it's very strong, but we might not be the last word on that. Your case may go out the window. And if it does, we promise we will take it as far as we have to. We will go to the United States Supreme Court if we have to, which we ultimately did. But that's for later on in the evening. So at that point, we write Mr. Nacher's will. That's in April of 1994. So when the Dresdner Bank's lawyers get the complaint, they're on Park Avenue. We're on Queens Boulevard. It's a little bit different, the relative things here. So we decided we're having a settlement conference. Okay. So Ronnie comes from Toronto, and he takes Mr. Nacher in his wheelchair in a yellow cab to Park Avenue, and we go on the subway to a conference. We're going to have a settlement conference with the lawyers for the Dresdner Bank, and they take this very seriously. They fly in the top executives of the bank from Frankfurt. So we're sitting there with the top executives of the bank from Frankfurt, and Mr. Nacher in his wheelchair. They don't want to let Ronnie in the meeting. And they serve us ham sandwiches. So then they talk in German. Mr. Nacher talks in German, and the bank executives talk in German. They seem to be having a very good time. We don't understand a word that they're saying, but nothing comes of that. So, we send them some discovery demands. We want to see all their records concerning this thing. The Germans, by the way, kept scrupulous records. They have records of everything, and the United States government seized most of these records in connection with fighting World War II, and they're all in a warehouse in Sweetland, Maryland. And a professor named Raoul Hilberg spent his PhD dissertation reading all of this stuff, and he wrote a book called The Destruction of the European Jews, which I bought and read tearfully. I called him up. There's a section in there about the Dresdner Bank and how they seized all these properties and how they seized Engelhard, and it's all in the book. So I call up Professor Hilberg and I ask him if will he be an expert witness, which he says that he will. And so they're not answering our discovery demands. So we put it on the calendar for a PC. So we're going to have a PC. Now, the Queen's Supreme Court ran out of room, so that we're having extra parts in the Queensborough Hall. So we have the PC in the Queensborough Hall. Well, the Nazis bank, I shouldn't say that, the Dresdner Bank, they send their executives to the PC. They come in a plane to Kennedy, they come in a limousine to the Queensborough Hall. We come in the subway, but I could not go in. I couldn't go. To me, it was, we have the executives of the Dresdner Bank and the Queensborough Hall. I couldn't go. I just, even though I was on the homicide panel, even though I'd been there every day, even though I tried lots of jury trials, even though this was like, I was more at home there than in my own home, couldn't go. So Leavitt went, even though the way we had the duties divided, he wrote wills, he did closings, all the litigation I did. That's the way we had the jobs divided. But I said, Mark, you got to go to this. I can't go. I can't. I'll start screaming. I won't, it won't, I'm going to lose it. You can't, you have to go. So he went. So he told me what happened. The Dresdner Bank's lawyers, they said, look, this is ridiculous. It's 60 years old. You can't do it. We want all motion to dismiss right now. Okay, so we had Judge Joseph Lane. He listens, and he says, nope. Sounds like a good case to me, which I was amazed, absolutely amazed. So you're having the depositions. So we said, look, the guy's 90 years old. We're not, going to your office again. This has got to be limited to 2 hours, and it's got to be in his apartment. So we got that. It was limited to 2 hours. It was in his apartment, and they were directed to answer all of our interrogatories and provide all the discovery, and we completely win this. It's like, this is like a dream, We thought the case was over that day, but it wasn't. Anyway, so then we proceed to have Mr. Nacher's deposition, which he didn't do too well, because he didn't remember a lot. He was very angry. At one point he said, the rest of my records are between me and God. That was not a good answer. I really didn't think, the case was going to go very well at that point. So Marc and I decided, well, what are we going to do now? The witnesses are certainly all dead. He's certainly going to be dead before we ever get to trial. And not only that, how's this case? Are we going to ever try this case? Where are we going to get all the evidence, even though we know it happened? So we decided, okay, we're going to go to the Holocaust Museum, and we're going to ask them to help us. It just recently opened. So we write to the Holocaust Museum. We get an appointment with the director of the Holocaust Museum, and the director and the executive director and the director of the library and the director of research. All the brass of this museum show up. We get on Amtrak, we go down, we give them the whole Nacher file. All of my theories, the summons and complaint, with my theories in it, the documents, everything we have, the whole file, this thick, here. It's for history, it's for posterity. Also, we want you to help us. They were very happy to receive the file. They were not too happy to help us. They said, no, you're on your own. But maybe you should call Senator D'Amato. He's the one who helped us set up the museum. We write to him, no response. We write to a lot of leading American Jewish groups. They're going to help us. No, nobody, you did what? You're suing the Nazis bank 60 years later. You're really a little bit off. You should do a thing like that. We're not helping you. That was pretty much the response of everybody that we asked. The next thing that happens was Mr. Nacher died. So, take the will to the Queens County Surrogates Court, arrange the probate, Ronnie's appointed, and now we have to get the consent of all of Mr. Nacher's heirs, of which he has many cousins and several charities. And all these people, because they were all kicked out of their native country, they live all over the world. Because this is actually a pre-Holocaust case. That is, before the Nazis set up the concentration camps, they kicked all the Jews out of Germany, and they all went all over the world, and they confiscated their property. So these people are all over the world. So at that point, Marc and I look at each other, we say, you know, this is now too big for us. How are we going to do this? We still have our regular practices, you know, criminal cases, matrimonial cases, surrogates court, accidents, the usual drill. And we're up to here with regular cases, and what are we going to do with this? And we better get somebody to help us. So lo and behold, we are sent an officer from the Israeli army. Aha! So now Yossi's going to tell you what happens after that.
All right. I'm not as talented as Paul and Marc on legal skills, either in writing or reading, or definitely going to the court, Queens Boulevard or anywhere else. I'm pretty good on the surrogate court. When was it? 1997?
1996.
1996, Marc comes to me, and he tells me very briefly about the case, and he puts about 10 boxes in German. And he tells me the story that Paul told you so far, with all the excitement. They won the motion against the attorneys of Dresdner Bank, which is a great victory, and we're dreaming about victory in dollars. They want settlement discussions, very good. Only to find out that we can't move an inch further until we do not prove actually that the heirs connected today are in fact connected to Ignaz Nacher, Germany. Well, that requires, I would say, about 2 years' work. So the case in Queens stops totally because they cannot proceed. And do you want me to cover how you met Sebastian?
Oh, I should tell you that, right. I left out a
Okay,
part.
go ahead.
When it occurs to us, while we're gathering evidence in this case, the translator we hired, Professor Peter Brown, he said, you really need a German lawyer to help you, which I was very resistant to because of my own prejudices. A lot of this was overcoming my own anyway, internal angst. So I didn't want to get a German lawyer. I said, no, we'll do it ourselves. I mean, I was arrogant like that. But then I realized, really, there's going to be things there that we don't know. Plus, one of their affirmative defenses was, there are alternative administrative remedies in Germany which you should pursue before you start a New York State court case. So between what Professor Brown told me and this affirmative defense that the Dresdner Bank advanced, we decided we better get a German lawyer. Okay, so how are we going to do that? There's more than a little enmity there. So Professor Brown gets us an appointment with the German consulate in New York. So Leavitt and I, it's on 57th Street and 5th Avenue. We go to the German consulate in New York. Now, this was a very hard trip for me. My grandparents, who lost their brothers and sisters, they had a small clothing store on 57th Street and 3rd Avenue when I was a kid, which was in the 1950s. And so to walk to the German consulate, I had to walk past where their store had been. And I swear they were there with me, even though they'd been dead for at least 15 years by then. I mean, they died in their 80s in New York in the 1970s. So this was 1995. It felt like they were with me. I walked into the German consulate, and Leavitt was with me, and we had an appointment with some top official, and I opened my mouth to tell you the story that I just told you, and no words come out. I can't talk. So Leavitt talks. He tells the story. And they give us the name of Sebastian Schutz. Sebastian Schutz turns out to be one of the...
I'll tell.
You'll tell. Okay. He'll tell you who Sebastian Schutz is. One of the finest people I ever met, but not yet. So go ahead.